Hello, and welcome to How to Support and Communicate with Your Deaf Child. I am Esmeralda Ruiz, and I am currently a student at the University of Lancashire, and I hope in the future to have a career in helping deaf children as well. And I thought it'd be a good start to have some resources for any hearing parent that might have just learned that their child is deaf. And to begin, I just wanted to say that it's okay to feel anxious or worried or as if your deaf child is the only one and they won't be able to succeed as much as maybe a hearing child could. But they're not alone and they can still succeed and have a great career later on in the future. Overall, there are 54,000 deaf children that are in the United Kingdom alone. And with the proper resources, they can do many things in their life, whatever it is they believe or whatever it is they want to do with their career. Um, Usually, or sometimes, it's recommended that they have hearing aids or cochlear implants, but sign language is also something that they could benefit a lot from. And I want to state that being involved in the deaf community and having that effective communication in the home really can help improve their life as well as like their way of understanding the world around them. So, before we talk about hearing aids and cochlear implants, I thought it would be important to talk about how the ear works. I've made sure to simplify it because I know that sometimes there can be a lot of medical jargon when we talk about how specific things work. But I try to keep it simple, and in order to know how hearing aids and cochlear implants work, it's just good to know how the ear itself works. There are three parts to the ear. The first part is the outer ear, and that's the part of the ear that you can see. It amplifies and transmits the sound to the eardrum, and the eardrum feels the vibrations through the air. That's what sound is, vibrations. Uh, and the eardrum is essentially the barrier to the middle ear. Now, the second part of the ear is basically where these three tiny bones are, and it's connected to the eardrum so that those three bones kind of shake from the vibrations of the eardrum, and that transmits it to the inner ear. Essentially, the middle ear is just a connecting point from the outer ear to the inner ear. That's all the middle ear is. Of course, I'm oversimplifying this. They could go more into detail, but I think simplifying it is the best way to describe what's happening with sound. Now, the final part, and hopefully you're still with me, is the inner ear. Now, this is where the cochlea is. Therefore, it's where the cochlear implant is placed, but we'll talk more about that later. The cochlea itself is filled with liquid in these small little parts of the cochlea, and that liquid helps support balance essentially. And then we also have small hairs that help pick up the vibrations that are just felt, and those small hairs kind of sends that through the nerves. It's kind of like taking it as energy, and the brain is deciphering that energy. Overall, sound is just vibrations from the air being converted into energy that the brain can understand. That's how we just understand sound, essentially. Now, let's talk about the difference between hearing aids and cochlear implants. Hearing aids tend to vary overall since there are many different types of deafness, especially with someone wearing a hearing aid. And the hearing aid is similar to how the ear works. The microphone is what's taking in the vibrations. The sound is then being transferred through the receiver, and then the amplifier is just repeating what is happening just a little louder, essentially, into the ear itself. So this works with the outer ear and the middle ear, essentially. It's not something that goes beyond the cochlea, since this is something that's like inserted onto the outer ear. You just wear it on you. And it helps those who have mild, moderate, or severe hearing loss. Mild hearing loss is where someone can hear someone speaking, but they can't hear whispering. Moderate hearing loss is where they can hear someone speaking loudly or shouting. And then severe hearing loss is when they can hear something, at the very least, someone like a baby crying or like very loud construction equipment. Um, however, they can't hear anything less than that. And that's okay. It's just a different way of living. Um, Now, they were talking about cochlear implants. Cochlear implants were introduced not that long ago. They were introduced in the 1980s. And they have a different part. Instead of an amplifier, they have a processor, right? So the microphone, that's where the sound goes in. Processor is magnetically attached to the receiver, which is surgically inserted um, to the cochlea. So essentially, um, the surgery or recovering from the surgery is usually 2 to 3 weeks. And the receiver is what's taking in that energy and letting it go through the cochlea itself. So it takes practice because it's not listening to sound naturally. It's like not taking in those vibrations. It's more like taking in the energy as it is, if that makes sense. And so usually the cochlear implant is adjusted with an audiologist after the surgery or where the surgery has taken place, where if it's been healed. And there are multiple follow-up visits to make sure that's all working okay. It's usually recommended for those who are profoundly deaf or a deaf person who just can't hear anything louder than 81 decibels. So, like I said, that would be like you would not be able to hear construction equipment, essentially, or anything that would really harm our own ears, if that makes sense. Yeah. So sometimes hearing aids or cochlear implants or anything within that realm, maybe it's not enough to help with effective communication. Or maybe a child finds them uncomfortable and doesn't want to keep them on their head or anything like that. So essentially, it's I so now we're going to talk about sign language. Sign language is something that's been used for thousands of years. It's just the natural way of deaf people to just communicate. Um, and this is because they can't access the background noise that we're used to every day, like the TV in the background, the noises of people walking past us. They don't notice the conversations we're having with strangers, and so on and so forth. And with sign language, we can help prevent them from feeling alone or from not being able to acquire any type of language. And of course, there are different types of sign language in every country. There's American Sign Language, there's British Sign Language, there's French Sign Language, and so many more languages. Um, and all of these differ. There's not just one universal type of sign language. And the reason for that is because every country, they all develop language differently anyway. Um, Deaf children overall, they also just who pick up sign have a better literacy rate than those who never pick up sign. Because again, they're making the connections with the world as well as like with language. And deaf children overall, when they learn sign, they're always looking around visually for things to see. So they pick that up the same way a hearing child would learn a verbal language. Um, and also, being bilingual is a great benefit. That deaf person or deaf child not only can connect with the deaf community, they can also connect with the hearing world. If they learn British Sign Language, then they can also learn English at the same time. And that can really benefit them and help them succeed a lot more than if they didn't know either language to begin with. You might be wondering, how can I support signing with my child in the best way I can? Well, they can take a BSL class, and that can definitely help you with your fluency in sign language. However, classes tend to be inaccessible in how expensive they can be. And if you do have the resources in order to take a class, then it's best to learn from a deaf teacher, since a hearing person tends to follow spoken grammar than they would sign grammar, We're constantly having the spoken language influencing how we sign ourselves. I know I definitely have that influence as I'm learning sign in college, right, or in university right now. Um, but you can also be part of a deaf club or have a deaf role model is who is efficient in sign language. Um, a deaf role model is essentially can be a deaf family member or a deaf friend if you know any deaf people in general. Um, but a deaf club is like a social gathering with deaf people in general. They can either do bingo, they have other events, maybe they go on trails, who knows. Overall, seeing other deaf people can definitely have a positive influence on a deaf child and have them see that they're not the only one, and maybe have them influence that sign can be a great language and can be something that helps them establish their own identity in the deaf community. And then there are a lot of educational shows in sign that can provide great representation as well. Lumo TV is a resource where it's deaf led with a lot of deaf shows overall. See Here is another great show with a lot of informative types of episodes. And then BBC Magic Hands, that's more preschool, I believe, but that doesn't mean your child would still not benefit from something like that. And then a social worker or teacher for the deaf, or even the National Children's Deaf Society can all provide great resources and further information about signing with your deaf child. And then I also want to get into advice about signing. One of the things you should be aware of is essentially anything blocking your child's view, right? So if you're in front of a laptop and your deaf child is behind it, then you might be signing something, but they may not understand the full message completely because they can't see the specific shapes of your hands or the specific movements. Therefore, you have to make sure that it's out of your way before you start communicating with them. And then also be mindful of facial expressions. Think of facial expressions as the way you are using your tone. It's as if tone is kind of impacting your meaning. Like if you're signing happy and your face looks bored, this could be understood as sarcasm, or maybe it might just be confusing to the child. And it can also emphasize what you're trying to say. Let's say you're signing the sign for hungry, and you have like, maybe you look a little upset, but you don't look completely you don't look distraught. That could mean I'm feeling a little hungry. If you have a devastated face while you're signing hungry, then that can express, God, I could eat anything right now. And therefore, facial expression is similar to how tone works. And then something else to keep in mind is that you should really stick to using your dominant hand when you're doing signs, especially if it's with only one movement. Switching between your non-dominant hand to your dominant hand can be very confusing. A lot of the time, pointing is natural in sign language. And of course, you might think it's rude to point, but in order to get your message across, sometimes it's best to point. And, it can help your deaf child understand, oh, you're talking about this object, or maybe they're pointing to something that they might want, and it's okay to give them that object if they want it, if it's reasonable, obviously. But pointing is fine in sign language. It's completely normal to do. And I just want to state, effective communication is better than no communication, just any type of communication, really. Many experiences within the deaf community reflect that lack of language can have a terrible impact on how they get along, not with getting along with other people, but with how they connect with other people. They might feel more alone, they might feel more misunderstood. In any sign language that's being used is better than no sign. They can still form connections with the amount of sign that you give them. and it can also help them acquire language at the same time as a hearing child could. And even now, taking the time to learn just a little bit more about deafness is already a good step forward. And it's okay to still feel overwhelmed by all of this information. It's okay to still feel stressed because it is a lot of information. I'm sure throughout your whole parenting years, you'll still be given several pieces more of information. And it's okay to just be compassionate to yourself as you learn more about the deaf experience. And it's okay to, you know, take a step back whenever you need to as you're taking all of this information in. It's okay to have empathy because you are also learning alongside your deaf child on what deafness can be. Um, and finally, I just want to have some additional resources. You can take a screenshot of this. You can um, keep it in the back of your mind. It's all up to you. Um, and I think having these additional resources can definitely help you if you want to have further information about deafness and other places to find the support you need. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching, and I wish you the best in learning about deafness and in helping your child succeed to the best they can be. Thank you.